Welcome to the HR Empowerment Podcast, where we will uncover strategies and new insights from HR professionals who discuss up-to-date regulations, best practices, and the most pressing topics like diversity and equity, leadership, dealing with difficult situations, and much more that affect your bottom line and business. Thanks for joining us.
Hey everybody, Wendy Sellers here, the HR lady. Welcome back to HR Empowerment. We are here today with an amazing guest, and we will jump into that in a moment. But first, I want to just go ahead and say hello to my co-host, JC.
Ms. Wendy, it's good to see you today. Great hearing you. How are you?
Fantastic. I should say my award-winning co-host here. We won an award for our other podcast, which has now merged with this podcast. So that was the HR Lady podcast. But JC's very own podcast, Interesting Things with JC, has won multiple awards. JC, congratulations. So well deserved.
I appreciate that very much. Yeah, it's been a little crazy having a Telly Award come through, and as well as most recently, the Video Awards, Hermes Creative Awards, the AVA Digital Awards, Communicator Award of Excellence. I feel blessed and honored. There's more. I'm not going to go down the whole list. Thank you for mentioning it, Wendy, and plugging it right at the top. That's very kind of you.
Yes, absolutely. Hey, I could not do this podcast without you, so I appreciate it. Today, we have with us an amazing guest, Dr. Benjamin Ritter, author of the amazing bestseller and award-winning book, Becoming Fearless. He's a leadership and career coach, talent development executive, and international speaker. I love all of this. I love the title of your book. How you doing, Ben?
I am doing incredible. I wish I had like a audience clapping soundtrack though for JC's awards. I was like, keep going. How many do you have?
Yep, every day there seems to be a new one. Like, hey, I got another award. But you do got to check out Interesting Things with JC. They're very, very, very short podcasts, and they're about everything in the world. And I'm not even kidding you. So it's the most amazing thing that you could just learn something in about 5 minutes. But with that said, let's get back to you and to your experience. Thank you for your time today. Tell our listeners about you, Ben, and how you got to where you are now.
Oh, well, that should be an episode of Interesting Things, JC. Just a little wink, wink, And, so I had a very interesting upbringing when it comes to my career. I'm sure we all have when we look back, but everything that I wanted to do pretty much failed spectacularly. And it was wonderful because each of those failures was a lesson. But it led me to be pretty disengaged when I did finally find a full-time job after working a bunch of odd ones. And this one did not get cut by federal funding, did not end with a dead end because someone cut my path to it. But in that full-time job, I really never thought that work was supposed to work out. And so I went in each and every single day trying not to work. And it didn't help that like a lot of people probably, like active disengagement. But I also had to add a little bit of fun to the mix. Pretty toxic leaders when they stayed, because I had, I think, 4 different bosses in the first position, and then I was promoted and had 2 different CEOs who was my direct report, meaning he was my direct manager. And then I had some pretty toxic peers to the point where they'd be standing at my desk waiting for me to come into work and liked to slam doors and call me names. And I'm not a fighter, pretty quiet. It just seemed it was a very, very dangerous environment. There were cultures that were merging. And we went through 3 different acquisitions. And so add active disengagement along with toxic environment, you end up pretty much trying to avoid everything and anything with that position. And so I never really learned how to make work for me, and kind of was my worst enemy when it came to actually getting something out of my career. And I kept having one foot out the door, but then they'd kind of dangle something above me. And one of the things they dangled was actually a 16-month leadership training. And
oh, wow.
Interestingly enough, I was paired with the director of our programming, kind of be like the head of talent development today or head of leadership development. And it was the first time in my career where I actually had a leader that I didn't feel unsafe with. And I think I was so sick of being unhappy. Like, I actually remember walking to work one day and looking around me and being like, wow, look at all these people so unhappy about their jobs. Sucks to be them. And I was like, wait,
that's me.
It's me. And it was a mirror. And so it was kind of like all these things converged at once, where it was like, I was really unhappy. I realized I was being a victim, and I finally had a safe place to talk about what was happening. And it helped knock me out of my being my worst enemy. And I realized that by believing my job was wrong, I prevented any opportunity to make it right. And I was able to do a pretty severe career audit and lots of reflection and introspection, but I also had a lot of skills. I had a decent network. I kind of was at this really great point to know what that path should be moving forwards. As long as I felt like I was the leader of my career, like I could actually take action towards it. Because of all those failures up to that point, I was pretty afraid of losing my job. I was afraid of not having that 9 to 5 and not having that paycheck, despite having a bunch of like odd jobs as well. And that was when I finally realized that, the merging of my interests and my passions and all that kind of stuff. And if I really took the reins of my career, I wanted to go down the path of talent development. And so that was the spark. I went to my boss and had the conversation at the time. I went and enrolled in a doctoral program. Like I tried a bunch of things, but eventually it led me to build the career path and the business that I'm on today, and whereas I head of talent development for a life sciences manufacturer, I was in other learning positions. I am now going to helping teach the CHRO executive certificate program for University of Chicago, executive coach for the CDC, and kind of built this business called Live for Yourself Consulting, and really trying to promote this idea of being the leader of your own career, becoming fearless, because I wasted like 10, 15 years of my career, and I don't want anyone else to really have to do that.
Yeah, wow, that's amazing. Thanks for sharing that. In fact, one stat that I'm looking at right now from Harvard Business Review says that toxic coworkers cause 78% of employees to reduce their commitment to the organization. And it sounds like, that's kind of where you started out, but fortunately you had somebody or yourself to, pull yourself out of that situation. So, today I want to talk about how to lead when you're not the leader, right? So when you're not the official leader. And so that drives me crazy too. Just the word leader drives me crazy, because I personally believe, as the HR lady, that anybody could be a leader. You could lead from wherever you're at. It doesn't need to be an org chart line item or a title. But with that said, your work centers on living life without limits. How does that philosophy apply to someone trying to lead when they don't have the formal authority or a leadership title?
I think you just hit the nail on the head. It's not defining what you can and can't do by your title. Anyone can be a leader in a room. What is leadership? If you define it, at least from my perspective, a leader is someone that has followers. So a leader is someone that can influence, can persuade. And generally to do that, there's certain things that you need to have. Some leaders use authority. We don't have that. So how do you do it when you're not a leader? Yeah. Oh, well, you can persuade because of your relationship, because of trust, because of credibility, because of your passion and motivation, vision. And if you can create an environment that helps other people succeed and other people want to see you succeed, generally you can be a leader. And so then all you have to do is share what you'd like to happen in a way that aligns with other people's goals. And all of a sudden now you're the leader in the room. People want to follow you. But too often people that don't have the title hold back their ideas because they don't feel like they're allowed to share, or they're afraid of getting in trouble for sharing, or because maybe they shared once and were dismissed and they don't feel like it's worthwhile because they felt stepped on, or they haven't actually focused on what really should be their primary team. And their primary team are their peers. And I even would say that your primary team is your manager or even their peers. And then if you have direct reports, your secondary or tertiary team would kind of be that direct line, those direct reports. And if we instead start thinking about that team being kind of our cross-collaborating partners in different departments, or even our manager, all of a sudden now, how are we building those relationships? How are we connecting with them? How are we aligning to their goals? How are we helping them kind of win in places where they're struggling? And then you're going to convince people to want to follow you.
Right.
Only 14% of employees say that their organization effectively empowers them to lead without formal authority. And just 26% of employees strongly agree that their organization makes it easy to influence others without formal authority in place. It begs to ask the question, Ben, as I'm hearing your words, I'm absorbing it, I'm feeling it, I'm also thinking about something here. I'm thinking about that kid that just started playing soccer and is the fastest one out there. And the coach says, hey, pull back, give everyone else a chance. And we've seen that in the workplace. A natural leader might step up from their seat. They're taking charge. They're cross-collaborating. They're checking all the boxes, doing all the right things. They're out in front, leading the charge. But they also have that respect for hierarchy. And then that leader may turn to them, the official titled leader, and say, hey, let's give someone else a chance. Why don't you pull back a little bit? Over time, the perception that they are something that they are not, while they're just trying to comply with the hierarchy, could really start to overshadow that employee. What are your thoughts in regards to hierarchy and trying to lead from your seat at the same time?
Love that you used the soccer player example, because the first career that I really thought I was going to achieve was a professional soccer player. And
Wow.
yeah, that's really interesting that you shared that. It taught me a lot about passion and purpose and what really is, like what does meaning really mean when it comes to the workplace. And it's funny that this idea that leaders have to be leading from the front or be in charge is, I think that's one of the mistaken beliefs that keeps people that don't have the title to lead. A leader, I think, cultivates an environment that is oriented or aligned to each individual person to help them succeed. So if we're leading without authority, what that means is I'm trying to empower other people around me to do their jobs more successfully. And I'm one of the tools they see to do that. And so that's not really leading from the front. Yes, maybe you're sharing your ideas, but really what it is, and true leadership, is asking the right questions to help empower people to solve their own problems. Or asking the right questions to stimulate a conversation or create innovative thinking. Or raising the right questions to solve problems that the organization is facing. And so you're not sending the 10-page report about the things you think are all an issue in the organization. You're instead raising the questions to the right people and being open to having that discussion and maybe providing a solution. And yeah. I have seen way too often where individuals are held back, told, "Oh no, step back! Don't speak up in this meeting. You're not allowed." And yes, their voices are quieted, but I don't think that's the only way to lead from the front. Because generally, when they get almost to that executive level leader, or they almost become a senior leader, the number one piece of feedback I see is, "Oh well, they don't think you take charge enough. They don't think you share your opinions enough. They don't hear you enough. You're like, you just told me not to talk." So yeah. And that's where we have to then, okay, so if I can't tell people what to do, then I have to be the person engaging them towards what we all need to do. And that's, I think, the big difference.
Yeah, it really is. And thank you, JC. Thank you so much for asking that, because, I would say, my career, I was definitely, hello, have you met me? I'm loud, I'm proud, I'm bossy, I'm controlling. It took me a very long time to realize, that's not always a great leadership style. It's very good during emergencies. I do have to tell you that. I know how to put things into action quickly and solve problems that are happening right now. But it took me a very long time to say, okay, even if I had the leadership title, that I need other people to step up and I need to learn to engage people where that they can solve the problems for themselves. And you could do that no matter what type of, role you're in, what type of title you're in. Here's another statistic that kind of goes in line with that about like positional power is employees who feel their opinions count are 4.6 times more likely to feel empowered to perform their best work. And that's from Gallup, as well as the other stats that JC shared before. So 4.6 times more likely to perform their work because they feel that their opinions count, which means we need to, let other people talk and we need to listen. What are your thoughts on that, Ben?
I was just thinking about the employee that just sends an email asking for a task, or an employee that just responds to a task with an, "Okay, here you go." You're missing opportunities to lead. You're missing opportunities to ask, "What do you think?" Or, "Hey, can I get your opinion on something?" And that statistic you just shared around having your opinion matter, any person or any position in an organization can help someone feel like their opinion matters. And this opportunity to kind of break down silos, to raise your opportunity to be a leader within an organization is available to everybody. And we just don't do it. And generally, the number one excuse is, I don't have time. I don't have time, it's not my role. I don't have time, it's not my role. Well, if we're thinking long-term for our careers, in terms of our own leadership opportunities in an organization, it's not about the work. It's about your future. And so then how are you, again, building the relationships and building your brand towards what you want to create for yourself later on? And so we have to kind of get out of our title, get out of our position, and start developing the skills, I think, that are going to represent leadership. And one of those is what you just shared, is asking people about their opinions and letting them know that you heard them, and then following up and following through on them.
Employees with high organizational trust, they're 12 times more likely to feel like they can influence decisions in the workplace. Wendy, back to you.
12 times, that's a lot. So seriously, going back to what Ben said, and I think I was saying it too, is like not only letting them speak, but actually listen to them and let them know that you are listening. Hey, Ben, can you share a story, maybe from your consulting or your coaching work, where someone without a title became a powerful leader within their organization?
Yeah, one of the biggest issues with this individual, who actually was up for promotion. So this person was very much on the leadership track, but leadership submitted him for coaching because his executive presence or communication was not where it needed to be. And he did not really think he was a leader. And so he was holding back his voice within one of those like senior leadership meetings. He was holding back his voice when emails would come through. Like he had ideas, he had opinions, but he didn't feel like he had permission to give them. And he also didn't know how to share them, and especially with his team too. He was very much a director instead of a guide, or a coach. Very much a listener in those meetings and a doer of the work than a strategist. And so we had to switch kind of how he viewed his own role in an organization. They're not paying you for the work. They're paying you for your ability to grow others to do the work, and for your ability to see long term within this space that supposedly you're a subject matter expert in. That's what they want to hear from you. You also need to learn how to convey those ideas in a way that senior leaders actually care about. And so we really worked on his altitude. And I like to think of, and it's helped other people, it might not help others, but so imagine like a mountain, and you're a leader at the top of that mountain. All your other leaders that you're trying to speak to are on mountains above you. And so they have a very different view of the landscape. And maybe there's something even blocking your view from what they're seeing. And you have to figure out how you can walk the trail up to their summit, up to the next peak, and put yourself in their position in terms of what they're seeing. And very often we just look down and talk to the team that we have. But even if you're trying to communicate to people that are your peers, look at what they're seeing. They're seeing a whole different landscape too. So do that check-in before you actually go into the meeting to share your ideas or your viewpoints, to ensure that you're aligning with their goals and that they want to listen to you, that you're catching their attention, but also they think you get it. Because a lot of times, like this individual, they just didn't think he got it. And so once we started doing a little bit of meeting prep, a little bit of email prep in terms of what are your ideas, how to frame them in a way where people actually care, how to give you confidence to redefine your role as a leader, he started talking in a way that people actually felt that he was listening and that he understood the direction of the organization and was able to then convey his own experience in a way that people cared about too. So it was leveraging questions and inquiry, but then also advocacy within his work environment, and ended up leading him to get that promotion to that next level where he did have the title to be a leader. So it was worth it.
So here's a question for you on that story, which is, I think a lot of us have lived. Some people are still living at this point where, often you might be asked to step up, but then you're asked to sit down, and you're getting back and forth, like, what do I do? So at what point, when you speak the leader's language, do you break away and skip the hierarchy to do the leadership thing? When do you, as an employee who doesn't have the title, when is it the right time to skip, I don't want to say around the official leader, but to say, I need to do the right thing. I need to take action. That's a hard one.
Yeah, I was working with an executive client today, and we were talking, they're onboarding into a new role, and they were talking about how they were really unhappy with something they're noticing in the organization. It wasn't aligning to the values that they thought were important about this one part. Like they were in this one function, and they thought that value was important to the entire organization, but they didn't think that the company was aligned to it. And we were talking, and it eventually came to the conclusion that this person's going to send an email to the CEO. They're going to contact the CEO of this major global company. And that, a lot of people won't do that. A lot of people don't think that that's something that is within their level of capability in an organization. You are a manager, you are a director. What gives them the right to actually send an email to the CEO of a company? And I think you don't need the right. You don't need permission. You can do it at any time. as long as you have a reason, and as long as you're not complaining, as long as you're not being the victim, as long as you're not giving them a problem. I think they call it giving someone the monkey. You're putting the monkey on their shoulders. You're saying, oh, it's not my problem anymore. No, you actually care about the mission and vision of the organization. You're bringing something that's important that they're going to care about. Present it to them and give them a potential solution and invite them to a conversation. Anyone can do that at any single time. You don't need the title for it. I think this idea of hierarchy is just in itself is self-limiting. We have it there because it keeps us safe, and we stick to it because we think that's what we're supposed to do. When if you're part of a company, you're actually part of a company, and you're not a peon within that company. You're not playing one role within that company. You are a part of the overall broader company itself. And I had this like old friend who was an electrician, a trade, and he would go around Chicago and build buildings. And build them. You know, he did the electrician work within that building. He'd pull wire, you know, he'd do all that kind of stuff. And we'd be driving by this skyscraper, and it was like mega skyscraper. And you might have worked on like this kind of initial piece of it on one of the floors before someone else came in. And he goes, Ben, I built that building. And he was so proud. He looked at me, I built that building. And it hit me because I'm like, you didn't build that building. Like 1,000 people built that building. You built like you did like one small component of that building. I didn't say that to him. And it just because he truly felt, and he was so proud of that building. And so there's some aspect of our jobs that I think we've lost. And I think it's kind of a good thing because we don't want to feel too much that we are part of a company where they own us. We need to still have boundaries. There's an aspect of that that's truly important, which is I am part of this company. I am this company. And so then I don't need to follow this silly hierarchy. I can go to the top.
Employees who feel encouraged to take that initiative, they're 2.5 times more likely to be engaged at work.
That's important because, you know, we've been talking about this forever, but we'll just say definitely post-pandemic where, you know, majority of the workplace, our workforce is unengaged, and then we blame the employees, but it's not the employees that are just going, hey, I'm not going to be engaged anymore. It's because of lack of leadership. And again, I mean leadership, period. Again, it drives me nuts when people are like, oh, you want to do some leadership training? I do a lot of leadership training, management training, HR training. And I'm like, well, I want to know who's going to be in the room because I want to train everybody to be a leader. But I want to know, do you want it to be employee training, HR training, or management training? No matter what it is, they can all have the possibility of being a leader. Now, they can also say, you know what, I'm going to lead from where I'm at, and I'm going to do the bare minimum of my job because that's what I'm paid to do. And you know what? That's okay, too. We can't keep pushing everybody until they're burnt out. And so it's so important to understand that as HR, as managers, as business owners, as anybody who considers ourselves as leaders, that we really need to make sure we're opening up the possibilities for informal leaders to emerge. Hint, managers, if you get people on your team that are informal leaders, it's going to make your job easier because they're going to take on some of the hard work and the hard conversations, and they're going to become passionate about what you're making, what you're selling, what you're doing. What are your thoughts on that, Ben?
One of the trinities of being a leader is delegation, coaching, feedback, and delegation. And if a leader can get to the point where they are there just to remove roadblocks and sometimes an emotional support employee for their team, and to also ensure that the environment around their employees suits them, fits them, allows them to leverage their strengths and is oriented towards their career goals. You notice how I didn't say work? I didn't say like actual tasks.
Yeah.
That's kind of the dream. And not everyone also wants that as a leader. There's a lot of individual contributors that once they get a taste of leadership go, this isn't actually what I wanted. And so they do what's comfortable, which is doing the work because that's easy to be validated. You have a very easy, you have outcome that you can rate yourself by. You know when to stop your day and your work. But yeah, if a manager can empower their individual employees and help train them to develop certain skills, not everyone wants them, as you mentioned. It will, though. I think that's the definition of leadership, other than just it makes their job easier.
Yeah, it really is. Thanks for bringing that up too. So I wanted to just share that, I have people in my personal life too that have said, yeah, I took on a management role and I regretted it. And rarely have I seen people then go, you know what? I regret this. I want my job back. They usually leave the company because they're too embarrassed and they go and get their old job back, but somewhere else in another company. So number one, as the HR lady, I just want to say, folks, if you're promoting people internally to management, supervisor, management, anything, even project management, please, 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 please make sure that they're really up for the task. Make sure that you've interviewed them, you've figured out, what their SWOT analysis, their strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats are, so that you can be on the same page and they can say, this is what I want to do. These things I can't handle unless you get me more training and development or coaching in the case of Dr. Ben over here. So there's just so many opportunities to lose people because you put them into management. But we're not necessarily talking about, management here. I do have one question. You started getting into it about like empowering your teams and then delegating and then doing tactical work versus leadership. Many managers do want to empower their teams, but they struggle with letting go, especially if they're promoted from within. So what advice do you have for these managers, these leaders, trying to create a culture where leadership can come from any level?
Mm-hmm. Well, to let go, you have to let go of the way that you do things. And so that really means kind of redefining how the work needs to get done and letting your employees define what that is. And so you have your KPIs, you said you hold people accountable to completing the work, even just a simple task. And without even showing them how to do it or telling them how to do it, unless you have to, there's some sort of training involved, you ask them how they would like to do it and have them walk you through it. You make some slight adjustments along the way, but if the final product is going to be what you need, then you have to learn how to feel good about that employee learning new skills, even if it's, I think they say 80% of what your end product would be. And for yourself personally, learning to let go really needs you to define what you're being measured by. And so that means going to your manager and managing up a little bit and saying, okay, I'm in this people management role. I have new tasks and skills. I'm responsible for the work that is being done by my employees, but I'm actually not responsible for the work. I'm responsible for the employees. I'm responsible for creating an environment that empowers that employee to do the work. That means I'm responsible for providing them resources to do it. I'm responsible for aligning the meaning and the goals to the broader organizational goals and their interests. I'm responsible for making sure that they know how to do the work in the way that they want to do the work. And I'm responsible for removing roadblocks to them completing that work overall. So making sure that that kind of has a portion of the environment. But once you have that done, what are the things that you're being measured by from your manager? And those need to be your number one priorities. And I see this to kind of be the largest mistake from new managers that are so used to doing the work, is that they focus so much on that it comes time for performance review, and maybe they're not getting direct feedback from their manager throughout the time, but then they don't meet expectations or they don't get the grade that they want because they were so busy being the employee that they were. And so you really have to get clear from your manager what those expectations are. And hopefully that kind of knocks them into the path of not having to care so deeply about the work and being able to let go.
Right.
Teams that are led by managers who focus on strengths are 12.5% more productive and 8.9% more profitable, reflecting the impact of this core leadership. Wendy.
So important. Thank you for bringing up profit, because listen, that's why we're all here. I also work with a lot of nonprofits, and they still need money in order to, pay their bills and pay their people. And so it's super important to be focusing, as I mentioned before, on, that SWOT analysis. And then, of course, as you mentioned, Ben, of making sure they have goals. I would suggest SMART goals, which have metrics, which are very clearly defined of yay, thumbs up, we're doing good, or nope, we're not doing so good. So thank you for that stat, JC. This has been just amazing. It helps me remember that, again, I'm not completely crazy. I'm a little bit crazy if you met me, but I'm not completely crazy when I tell people, like, listen, it doesn't matter what your role is. You could lead from wherever. It's not about titles. It's not about org charts. It's not about who's been here longest. Sometimes it is about who speaks up the loudest, but that isn't the right way to lead. I learned that the hard way. Sometimes I call it, here's a bag of shush. Be quiet while somebody else talks. That might be the best leadership you can possibly have. So before we wrap up this podcast session here, Dr. Benjamin Ritter, are there any resources that you'd recommend for listeners invested in diving deeper into this topic? Maybe your book.
Well, I do recommend that everyone check out Becoming Fearless. So I'll have to put that plug in.
Absolutely.
There are 65 strategies for becoming fearless in your personal and professional life. So it helps you learn to be a self-leader, which is the most important leader that's ever going to be in your life. Too often we expect our leaders to be what we need, but we don't expect ourselves. And so hopefully that does help some people. And then I'm a big fan of Everyone Deserves a Great Manager. It's a really, really great kind of general book when it comes to learning how to lead a team. It's by Scott Jeffrey Miller. And I think that's a good place to start. One of the things overall, and I don't think it applies to some of our listeners, or all of our listeners, honestly, because you're investing time in your own growth, is that generally what I've noticed is most of the clients that I end up working with have never read a book on leadership. I've never listened to a podcast on leadership. And there is so much out there for you to learn. And if you just picked one skill, let's say you're not a manager right now, you don't have the title, you're like, I really want to learn what it means to have executive presence. Because I feel like when I walk in a room, I want people to listen to me. I want to have confidence. Great. Make that the one thing you learn all year.
Right.
And I promise you, you're going to start leading without authority.
Yeah, I love it. Absolutely love it. And folks, I will make sure that Dr. Ben Ritter's contact information, including the link to his book, is in the podcast description, so you can check that out as well. I truly hope that this podcast has been beneficial to you and helpful. It's a reminder, if you listen to this podcast through the HR Empowerment website, you can get HRCI and SHRM credits. Simply go to AuroraTrainingAdvantage.com and look for the podcast tab. Take care, everyone. And thank you so much, Dr. Ben Ritter. We appreciate it. Take care.
Thank you for joining the HR Empowerment Podcast, brought to you by Aurora Training Advantage. We hope you've gained new insight and strategies to navigate the HR profession. We look forward to you joining us again on the HR Empowerment Podcast.